It's a bird! It's a plane! It's Superman!
In 1932, two men, Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, created a hero and sold him to DC Comics in June of 1938. Today that hero is well known and loved throughout the world. He is Superman.
His name is Kal-El. He will call himself Clark Kent. But the world will know him as Superman.
Superman first appeared outside of his comic origins in 1940 in a radio serial. His first appearance on screen was in 1941 in his first of many cartoon series.
Hero, isn't he? He's the hero that sort of is responsible for every other hero.
I don't know really. It's probably mostly because the Americans, they quite like the kind of colour scheme problem, like because it's kind of the whole truth, justice, the American way kind of thing, and people like kind of truth, justice, and somewhat the American way, but I'm not sure about it these days.
Because he's cross-generational. I think when a character becomes that old, it's the grandparents who are introducing it to the grandchildren, and you know, you tend to like what your parents have liked and what your grandparents have liked and what you're exposed to when you are a child. So anything that lasts that long will always be able to last.
Well, obviously he's had to change because of the times, isn't it? So I mean, because he's like a family man, he's married and everything, so.
Sort of. He's not as like as big a figure as he was back then, I think. But people kind of still really pay a lot of attention to him. Like, I mean, like a couple of years ago with his death, and it was like on newspaper and things.
He's an icon. So it's not a question of importance. It's just a question of sheer presence. There's not a country in the world that doesn't actually see Superman as well, as a symbol of America.
Superman has been portrayed by many different actors, from John Haymes Newton and Jared Christopher in Superboy, to Dean Cain in Lois and Clark, and recently Tom Welling in Smallville.
Just been watching the George Reeves colour series, the old 1957 series, Adventures of Superman. Now that's fun, it's good. Favourite actor to play it? It's got to be Christopher Reeve, hasn't it? I mean, he was so good as both Clark and as Superman. I think probably Christopher Reeve.
Oh, it has to be Christopher Reeve, hasn't it? So he's the benchmark. I mean, Brandon Ruth said he's the benchmark. So.
Since it was the first one I saw, probably the guy from Lois and Clark.
Dean Cain.
Yeah, that's him. Because I didn't see the movies until quite recently, really.
Superman's voice cast for the animated series is also as diverse, with Clayton Collier playing him in the original animated series, Tim Daly taking the role in Superman the animated series, Yuri Lowenthal in Legion of Superheroes.
I think it's more of a film, I think, because of the scale, the big, you know, the screen, the scale, the screen, and the sound and everything.
The cartoons can remain faithful to the comics because at the end of the day you couldn't put the comics directly on screen without spending $200, $300, $400, $500 million a movie. But I don't know. I think every Superman, every time you have a spin-off, whether it's TV, film, cartoons, you can create your own mythology, just like Smallville is creating its own mythology. You could argue that's not Superman, but of course it is.
Movies are quite good because they can do so much with it. But with the more smaller series, like the cartoons and the the TV shows, they can do a lot more things. They can do bigger stories and they can do much more kind of complex plots as well without spending a lot of money.
In 1984, Supergirl, played by Helen Slater, got her chance to grace the media world, but the film was unfortunately a complete flop. Supergirl returned to television in Superman the Animated Series and Justice League cartoons, in which she was a more popular character.
I think Brainiac happens to turn up sometime, or maybe Bizarro. So I mean, those are the two main ones, and you can do Lex Luthor like till the sun comes down, but he's just still a normal look. So when it gets a bit boring,
I'm a fan.
I kill you, and then Armageddon. Right on schedule.
To be honest, I think the most important thing is the story. So as long as whatever villain that does get used is impressive, both in terms of concept and scope.
I'm not the man who killed President Luthor. Right now, I wish to heaven that I were, but I'm not.
Someone who can kind of go toe to toe with him, like probably Doomsday or one of the kind of lesser known kind of really massive villains like Parallax or something.
Are you going to fight me, boy?
can't think of anyone who could actually do it justice.
No, because the one thing you need is someone who's no one's ever heard of. There are no preconceptions, there's no preconceived ideas.
Nah, I think the one they got so far is fine.
Well, that's the Richard Donner 1978 one. And the second one is good as well. So.
After the less than successful Superman 4, The Quest for Peace, Superman left the cinemas and found himself on television with a string of live-action shows from Superboy, Lois and Clark: The New Adventures of Superman, and Smallville, to the animated series of Superman the Animated Series, Justice League, and more recently, Legion of Superheroes.
Probably Returns.
In 2006, Superman came back to the cinemas in Superman Returns, starring Brandon Routh, which has again proved the popularity of the character, as a sequel has already been considered.
I love the second one, I must admit. These days I much prefer the Donner cut to the original, I must admit, but the second film is definitely my favourite.
I don't know, I don't think it'll work as a film really. I mean, as a cartoon it works fine, but it just exists a clash of styles, isn't it? So you need to find the balance.
I wouldn't mind a team up with Batman, but I don't think that would work, and the whole kind of Justice Society I think would be just too complex for a movie overall. Maybe they could do like individual movies and kind of somewhat lead towards a kind of small Justice League with just like 6 or 5 characters, but I doubt they could do the whole kind of thing.
Superman and Wonder Woman, Green Lantern, it would be so cool to see them on screen, but you'd need a sprawling epic mini-series that tied the universe. I mean, you'd need to do an adaptation of Crisis on Infinite Earths to give them real scope.
As long as the stories are good enough and they don't mess it up too much to the point where it just becomes the comic equivalent of Superman 3 and 4.
Yeah, he's lasted this long. I think he could easily last another 70 years, possibly another 100 years if paper still exists there. Yeah, internet comics and the online comics and all that kind of thing.
Throughout the years, a so-called curse of Superman has been attached to the character after the unfortunate possible suicide of George Reeves and the typecasting and paralysing of Christopher Reeve.
An icon, of course he will. It's essentially, once you've become an icon, you're there, you're on the landscape, you never go away, not really.
The Man of Steel has proven himself to be a true man of tomorrow. Here's to another 70 years of truth, justice, and the Kryptonian way.
You wrote that the world doesn't need a savior, but every day I hear people crying for one.
I see the world as folded in your heart.
This looks like a job for Superman.
Down inside.